Thank you for listening to the Bladder Battle Podcast special series, I See in the Dark. This series dives deep into the perplexing disease, interstitial cystitis. This podcast is intended to bring awareness and create conversation around the illness by providing possible remedies, tips for managing the disease, how you can show support, and so much more. This podcast is not intended to be a medical alternative for physician care, nor to treat, cure, or prevent any illness or disease. Always consult with a physician for professional medical advice. Today, we are talking all about aloe vera and what it has to do with helping relieve your bladder symptoms. Heather Florio, the CEO of Desert Harvest, is joining me today to share all about the amazing benefits of aloe, specifically for those with interstitial cystitis. So Heather, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Yes, we're going to get into some really great topics, and you're going to enlighten us all about the wonder plant aloe. So I'm very excited to have you on, and I'm a huge fan of Desert Harvest. It's been extremely beneficial and helpful for me in just restoring kind of my life.
We hear that a lot.
Yeah, it's really taken away a lot of those awful symptoms of burning and just discomfort. So it has really been a miracle for me. So I wanted to, share this with the IC community, in case anyone didn't know about your company. Hopefully now they will.
Yeah, we do. We get people that are like calling and they're like, I've had this for 20 years and it's like, we've been here. And we get to hear the same kind of stories. And I think that the benefit and the people that we get to help, we get to hear this all the time, and it makes a difference every day that we get to do this. So
that's awesome and so rewarding. So I kind of want to know your personal background and experience with IC before we get into the development behind creating Desert Harvest. So when were you diagnosed and what were some of those initial symptoms that you had?
So I had initially, and this was kind of the confusing part, I had endometriosis. Really bad. I had uterine fibroids. I had an ablation of the endometriosis and an excision of the endometriosis and an ablation of my uterus a couple of times. And the pelvic pain was overwhelming. Never thought about my bladder. It came to the point where I had to have a hysterectomy. There was no other options. It was whether we go in and excise again, what do we do to stop this? And so I went in and had a hysterectomy. And when I came out of anesthesia, they had done a cystoscopy of my bladder while I had been under, and woke up out of anesthesia. As soon as the anesthesia wore off, I could feel my bladder. I could feel the pain in my bladder. So when you have so many of these other things going on in the pelvic region, which so many of us women do, it's hard to differentiate where that pain is. And so for me, for my personal story, it was, recognizing that was part of my pain, and not just the endometriosis and not just the uterine fibroids. Once you took all those pieces away, I could feel my bladder. And so that kind of, and I went to go see my doctor, and, she's like, well, we could send you out for referrals for this. I could prescribe you this, options. And I said, you know what? I think I've got this. I'm like, I'll go home and take care of this myself, but thank you very much. And so I have been, able to manage with our products. I don't have the mast cell activation. So, doing antihistamines like hydroxyzine or in the drug form, or quercetin, like we sell the natural form. We don't, I didn't need to have that piece. I definitely do watch what I eat. Diet is definitely very important. And that has made a big difference for me. And then, taking my aloe every day, I'm down to, I know you had said you take one a day. I'm down to 3 a day. And so that seems to work for me. And then I feel like if I, go out and have drinks with the girls, that I just come home and I can feel it. I feel it start burning and the pain just a tinge. And it's like,
oh yeah,
I'm going to pop some extra aloe that night. And that's kind of what helps maintain for me. So,
well, yeah. And, it's really hard, especially for women, because we have so many other things going on down there. So it's really hard to pinpoint exactly where the pain is coming from. And for me, it all started with having flank pain, which I never thought had anything to do with my bladder. I know your kidneys, bladder are related, but I'm thinking I pulled a muscle, for a long time. I had no idea.
For me, I can sometimes get that flank pain that you're talking about. And sometimes for me, it definitely goes down like my sciatica. Like my left leg, because all of my muscles are tensing when you're in pain, and that pain can go down.
Oh, yeah.
And when I had everything all at once, the endometriosis, the uterine fibroids, and IC that I didn't know I had, the pain was constantly, like I knew when it started going down my leg, or I could feel my flank that I was really bad.
Right. And I get the same thing, like it runs down my right leg only. And you just don't think that has anything to do with your bladder, and, even doctors, sometimes it perplexes them and they just assume, well, maybe you do have sciatica. And it's like, well, I don't think so. I think there's something else going on. So it's hard. It's such a confusing disease that it's really hard to pinpoint what is happening and what's really going on. But that's amazing that you had access to one of the most wonderful things that I think exists. So that's great. You were already ahead of the game there and really finding some relief. So I kind of want to get into sort of the initial development of Desert Harvest. It's been around for actually quite a while. And not a lot of people actually know about it, is what I'm finding. And so I want to know, your parents founded the company. I kind of want to know what was their passion behind starting it, and kind of how has it evolved over the years?
So, my parents founded Desert Harvest in 1993. Prior to that, my aunt had interstitial cystitis. And at the time, it was hard for her to get a diagnosis. Back in the early 90s, late 80s, interstitial cystitis, you go to a urologist or a doctor, or women's health, and it was a completely psychosomatic disease in their minds, or that it was just all in their heads. It didn't really exist. It wasn't actual clinical medical diagnosis back then. And so to get a diagnosis was very difficult back then. And then after you got diagnosis, what were you left with? What options were you left with? What could you do? And it happened that my mother and my aunt was living with us at the time. And my mother and my aunt decided to go to a natural products conference. And back then this was like, natural products were different. They don't have the same space back then. Back then it was, you could go and you could get your tarot card reading, or you could, go find your healing crystals, or you could go find, just depending on what, it was a different kind of space than it is back then. It was less mainstream. And so they went to this conference, and my aunt happened to pick up some random bottle of aloe vera. And she brought it home that night, and she took the entire bottle, and anthraquinones, what gosh knows what was in the aloe, but she took the entire bottle in one night and slept through the entire night. And wow. For her, she had such bad nocturnia, like that was unheard of. And so she woke up the next morning, my mother, and then started talking and saying, we got to figure this out. How could we make this like, let's research aloe vera. Let's get with my mom had a friend who was a chemist, and it was like, how can we concentrate this? How can we make it safe for long-term use? And so they got with the chemist friend and developed the formula that we still use today, using the patented process that we still use today.
Wow, that is an incredible story. And, it's kind of has a comical aspect to it that she just took the whole bottle of, you don't even know what was exactly in there. But that's amazing that she found some sort of relief from the aloe, and that you guys were able to develop a formula that's concentrated and pure. So what are some of the actual benefits of aloe when it specifically pertains to the bladder, the urethra, some of those major symptoms that people with IC experience? How does aloe benefit that?
So the theory behind that is, although we've never been able to do an invasive study enough to make it definitive, but essentially aloe vera, the gag layer is missing, the coating in the bladder is missing in an interstitial cystitis patient. Mm-hmm. And that's your protective layer that's protecting the lining of your bladder. Aloe is made up of glycosaminoglycans, which in short is GAG. And so the theory is that those in high enough concentrations of glycosaminoglycans, the nutrients, the ace-mannan in the aloe vera is another term for it. The glycosaminoglycans are part of the ace-mannan, and those are coating that bladder and kind of creating that protective coating. Now, obviously, if you stop taking it, it usually takes about 72 hours or so. That lining, that gag layer would begin to dissipate. And that's kind of the theory that most practitioners that recommend our aloe vera. That's the theory that we're going behind, obviously without a more invasive study to confirm that. But the theory is those nutrients in the aloe vera. It also has antibacterials, antivirals, antifungals in it naturally. It is because of that ace-mannan, those nutrients. It also is high as an anti-inflammatory and an analgesic. Those are probably two of the best things aloe is known for. You think about putting it on a sunburn, which most people think of aloe in terms of, and you put it on, it's reducing that redness and helping to kind of help speed that healing of the skin. And so imagine that, but internally.
Yeah. I know for me, one of my major symptoms is urethral burning. And obviously it's an inflammatory response. So, when I first started experiencing that, I was like, it feels like an allergic reaction, but I'm not visibly having an allergic reaction. So I know that the supplements really help to take away that awful, just burning sensation where you feel like you can't even sit down. I mean, it gets so bad. Yes. But yeah, I mean, if you relate it to a sunburn, it is probably one of the most amazing things that I've always, grown aloe, and I would just pick off one of its, I guess they're called leaves. I don't really know exactly what you would call, and I would just peel it open and put it right on my sunburn, because I live in Florida. I get sunburned a lot. Oh, yeah. So that's amazing that you're able to find that internal connection with how it can be beneficial for anti-inflammatory and antiviral and antibacterial, because we become a little bit more susceptible to some of those bacterial infections too. And then you don't really know if you have an actual UTI or if you're just having a flare up. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it's a really great, even preventative measure as well. So
it is, because aloe has D-mannose in it naturally too. It's one of the extraction sources for D-mannose, and D-mannose has been scientifically proven in medical studies to bind to E. coli bacteria and help flush it out. And specifically at E. coli bacteria, it hasn't been studied or found to be beneficial with any other forms at this point. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one of the benefits. And so we maximize those benefits from all the way from where we grow it to how we grow it to how we process it. There's a lot that goes into what we do to maximize that nutrient content. We grow it in volcanic soil. So none of our aloe is grown here in the U.S. One, because there isn't really much aloe left grown in the U.S. for commercial uses because land is so expensive.
Right.
And so we have found that the best region that gives us some of the best high nutrient content soil, volcanic soil, is all around the Caribbean region. And so we will grow on some of the islands, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, and we work with sustainable organic farms. Specifically, they have to be USDA certified organic. And then what we do is we set up temporary on-site processing on those farms. And that allows us to begin the preservation process directly on site, because we use the Aloe barbadendis Miller species of the aloe plant. If you can imagine a full-grown aloe plant, probably about 4 feet wide, about 4 feet high, although we don't get that far with them because we're harvesting at the highest nutrient point. But about that size, which is roughly about 89 leaves, makes one of our 180 capsule bottles of our super strength aloe vera.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we go through a lot of aloe. And again, that goes into those maximizing the nutrients. We choose to utilize the whole leaf. There is a cheap scrape method, which will just cut out the inner gel. And a lot of people do that because there are anthraquinones, which are latex chemicals naturally in the aloe vera plant, and they can act as an irritant to the colon, and over time have been proven to be carcinogenic to the colon, as well as cause liver damage and kidney damage. And our FDA regulates them in the sense that there can be also parts per million of those in aloe vera. And so a lot of people will use that cheap scrape method. They might get it's usually you'll see it as interleaf gel on a bottle. And that is that way in which they can miss most of the anthraquinones, because just below the gel, when you open the leaf, is a tiny thin yellow layer. And then below that is the rind. And that thin yellow layer is the anthraquinones. But unfortunately, when you don't process the whole leaf, you're missing most of the best nutrients that are down there by the rind. And so that is why we choose to process the whole aloe vera. A lot of times you'll see words like digestive aid, different things like that on aloe bottles. That means that it has the anthraquinones in it. In a lot of cases, unless it specifically doesn't state it, you have to assume that it is in there just because the FDA doesn't say you have to filter them all out. And so what we do is, the minute you cut off an aloe leaf off of a plant, we begin starting to process and preserve the nutrients within 20 minutes of harvest. And the reason that we do this is because within 6 hours, all of the nutrients in an aloe leaf are dead. So if you've ever seen like an aloe leaf cut off sitting in the grocery store in the produce section, there's no nutrients left in that aloe leaf.
Wow.
And so a lot of the times with harvesters, what they'll do, and this is kind of why we set up on these temporary on-site processing, is they'll harvest, and then a few days later they'll send them off or different things like that. But you're not maintaining and maximizing those nutrients. And so that's why we start that immediate processing, so we can maximize those as much as possible. And then we use our patented process to do the process. We freeze dry it with our patent Cryovera process, and then we put it into a natural vegan capsule. And we add a little bit of pH to it, a little bit of calcium to it to help raise the pH and make it as alkaline as possible for the bladder. So there's 20 milligrams of calcium in every single one of our capsules, but 600 milligrams of aloe per capsule, which is the highest out there as far as, and that is because we did a double-blind placebo-controlled study with interstitial cystitis patients back in the 90s. And we had a 87.5% response rate of some or complete relief of all IC symptoms with just taking our capsules. In that study, we were looking, at a variety of different things, but specifically, we found that 3,600 milligrams a day is what an IC patient needs starting off for the first 3 months. And then from there, they can find a maintenance dose. But that is why we try to not only maximize the nutrients, but put the most aloe possible for capsule. It does, of course, make us a lot more expensive than what you would see on a grocery store shelf or different things like that on other aloe products. But that's because we aren't the same as other aloe products. And that is specifically because it goes back into that processing. And I didn't mention that we also filter out all of the insoluble fiber. And then with the freeze drying, we remove all of the excess water, which aloe is 95% water.
Yes, I can believe that. Definitely has a lot of water in it. Well, that is an amazing process. It's really reassuring to know how much of the aloe plant that you're using, because a lot of the supplements out there, they're only using a percentage of it, and it's not always the most valuable part of the plant. So that is amazing. And you mentioned your vegan capsule. So I did notice right away that your capsules are made kind of differently than the traditional, vegetarian or vegan capsules that are on the market. So can you explain exactly what they're made out of?
Yeah, we knew that many of the IC patients that we were working with when we were first starting out had very sensitive stomachs, or had very sensitive diets, and a lot of them were already vegan or vegetarian. And so what we decided to do was seek out a capsule that would be the safest and most effective. So this utilizes a tapioca starch that we use to make our capsules, so that there's no animal byproducts, and they're 100% vegan. They're also kosher certified. And that way that we wanted to make it so that could be for everybody who wanted to be able to take it.
It's very intentional, and it's great because it really makes you feel, as someone who suffers from IC, it makes me feel like you really care. You're really thinking about every part of the product, and that can be kind of forgotten about. A lot of supplement companies will just look, okay, I need a vegetarian capsule. I'm going to get it from vegetable cellulose. That doesn't always sit well with those who have chronic illnesses, and especially inflammatory illnesses like IC. So I think that's great. It's very intentional, and it just shows that you really care about wanting to make people feel better. So I think that's great. You have a really good company, a really great product. And, you should just be really proud, and that you've been around for as long as you have. I kind of want to get into some of the studies that you're working on so that desert harvest can become part of a viable treatment for urologists. So kind of touch on that for me.
So, yeah, we've been committed to research from the very beginning. We did our first study in 1995, the one I had mentioned at the Urology Wellness Center with the University of Maryland in Rockville, Maryland. When we did that study, we were a small, fledgling, very young company, but we wanted to be able to fund some research so that we could educate doctors, so that we could help people understand about our products. It was a small scale study. It was all we could afford back then. And so what we did in 2016 is we followed that up with a survey, because we were working with the NIH to get a multi-center grant. And we did that in partnership with the Interstitial Cystitis Association. And we found that in that we had 660 IC patients respond to us about whether they had taken the aloe, the benefit compared companion diseases, diet info. It gave us a ton of great info, not just on our products, but on the IC patient themselves. And we had a 92% response rate from that survey. And given this wasn't a fully double-blind placebo-controlled study, so there are always variables, but it gave us some great data to then take to the NIH. And because of that, we are doing right now, we have an ongoing study already in Italy going on right now, so that with the EAU, which is the Urology Association of Europe, we are trying to set the parameters for interstitial cystitis, put us as an option, as a first-line option before going to drugs. And so with that double-blind placebo-controlled study that we're doing in Italy, we hope to set the tone and the guidance there in Europe. And then on top of that, we are getting ready to launch our U.S. study with Dr. Robert Evans sometime this year. I can't say exactly when we get all of the pieces in the right spots and Dr. Evans is ready to launch, but we will be launching that study this year. And so we're really excited about that because we're going to be able to study a lot more. We're going to have a lot more patients. You know, our initial study had 12, but our survey had 660. And then we're hoping to, with this study, to get around 100 or so patients involved and then launch from there into more of a multi-center across the U.S. study. And so in this study, we're going to study not only just the initial dosage, but we also are going to study a few other things that we didn't study in the initial study. And that is, for several years, we have found that the patients that took a little bit longer to respond to the aloe, that we found that ramping up, if you start with 6 a day the first month, that second month, if you don't find your right level of relief, up it to 9 a day, and the third month, up it to 12 a day, if you're not seeing that level of relief. And we found that following this protocol, if you are going to respond, just like in our first study, you are going to respond within those first 3 months. But we found the ramp up made a difference for those that were taking a little bit longer to respond. And so we will be studying it in this study, as well as studying maintenance dosing down after those 3 months, so that you can get down to, like, you're on 1 a day, I'm on 3 a day. Everybody kind of has a different level of maintenance dose, and you know your body better than anybody else. And so we kind of have a dosage protocol of taking away a capsule for a whole week, seeing how you do. So let's say you're on 6 a day for 1 week, go to 5. If you do go the next week, 4. And then if for any reason, and so on and so forth, but if you feel any of your symptoms return, just go back up to the previous dose, and that becomes your maintenance dose. And so we're going to study those things a lot more. We're also going to try to help with some other interstitial cystitis research separate from our aloe by getting some baseline blood work that then can be used for comparison in other ongoing interstitial cystitis research, as far as maybe some commonalities, some other things that they can use to look into. So we're not just thinking just from the aloe perspective, but the interstitial cystitis patient as a whole in the studies. And so we'll be looking at quite a few different things in this study. So we're really excited.
That's incredible. One of the things that I was most surprised about when I was going through doctors and, waiting for a diagnosis, which, side note, took me 4 years to get diagnosed. Mm-hmm. One of the things that was never done was blood work. I mean, I would go and get my blood work done with my primary doctor, but no urologist ever suggested it. And I always found that to be just kind of strange. Like, maybe I have a deficiency, you might as well take it and just see if there's any, like you say, commonality between some of your other patients. So that was definitely a very surprising factor for me. And then the second one was that I really reiterated that I have a very natural approach. Of course, antibiotics have their place and should be taken when needed, But I'm not a huge fan of pharmaceuticals, and I always want to see what can I take naturally, what can I adjust in my life naturally that will really help relieve my symptoms. And my doctor was not on board with that at all. And I walked out of there with 3 prescriptions. So it's just, it kind of disgusted me, honestly. I was like, all right, this isn't the right doctor for me, but this is kind of the average protocol.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited for your company. I think this is going to be really eye-opening, and I really hope that a lot of urologists and urogynecologists really take this as a treatment and as an approach. Especially when you study that blood work, I'm interested to see if you do find any commonalities between IC patients, and then maybe when doctors are diagnosing interstitial cystitis patients, it won't take so many years to really get to the root cause. Maybe there is some sort of blood test that can be done. So I think it's really incredible, and just your partnership with the ICA. I think it's great that you're both teaming up and really trying to, fight this, because we need advocates like that. It's just so needed, and the research is what's been lacking. So I think that's just incredible that you guys are doing that.
There is some great research going on, and I'm hoping that it finds a difference, because, I was lucky when I had my cystoscopy. I was knocked out. But cystoscopy is highly uncomfortable, can make you feel like you're flaring worse, and is one of the only methods of diagnosis right now, besides, so a lot of times it's diagnosis of exclusion. And so to be able to, they're studying hopefully that urine samples, and hopefully they might be able to come up with a urine test or a blood test or something in the future. And the MAP project is a great research project that's being funded by the NIH that will hopefully, lead to something that will make at least diagnosis easier, that then can lead on to more and more research for interstitial cystitis that can provide more and more difference and relief. And right now only 2 subtypes exist for interstitial cystitis, ulcerative and non-ulcerative, but hopefully someday as there's theories that have been thrown out there and conjecture to go with it. And hopefully, I would imagine that in the future, the way the research is leading, that eventually there will be different subtypes that will then help not only with diagnosis, but additional treatment, those that have the mast cell activation, those that have the Hunter's ulcers, those that have a pelvic floor dysfunction component, and hopefully they'll be able to they're doing some great things, and they've got some great research going on between, I think right now is the University of Southern California, Northwestern, I know is part of that grant. Quite a few different doctors are partnering in on that project as well. So that is the forefront of research for interstitial cystitis, and hopefully, and we hope to be part of that, obviously, with our research and ongoing research with our products.
Yes, that definitely makes me feel better, and I'm sure a lot of those suffering with IC are going to find this to be very relieving news. It's so needed. One last question for you, because on my last order, I received this wonderful little marketing booklet that was well designed, by the way. I really liked it, and it was great. It had, how many, the dosage information. It was really like a guide that took you through what you should be taking and, how much you should be taking and how it can really be beneficial. But as I was flipping through it, I noticed there's a lot more products that you have. So can you touch on some of your other products and maybe any new products that you recently launched?
Yeah, so every one of our products was developed with an interstitial cystitis patient in mind. We've talked to tens of thousands over the years, and we hear different things, and we hear their needs and what they're looking for. And so every one of our supplements is IC friendly. They want to be able to take a vitamin C. So how can we do that? So we provide a buffered vitamin C. B complex. A lot of people have the gene mutation, the MTHR. I always pronounce it wrong. And that gene mutation, they can't process in certain Bs. And so like B6, the bladder, B6 is a bladder irritant. So we, in our B complex, in our multivitamin, we don't have any B6 in there. Each one of ours was chosen for a specific reason. Our probiotic was chosen because there was a recent, it's probably a few years ago now, medical study that showed that most probiotics out there in the market actually can inflame autoimmune conditions. And as we know, most IC patients, a lot of them have other companion-related autoimmune issues. And right. Research may lead someday that whether or not IC is part of an autoimmune thing. So what we did is we wanted to find probiotic that a strain that would not inflame autoimmune conditions. And so we were able to find the Bifidobacterium infantis specifically in that product. We bring the quercetin because it's a natural antihistamine. So when you're talking about that mast cell activation in the bladder, this is your natural alternative to things like hydroxyzine, that type of thing. And then there's also, like, we do the glucosamine and chondroitin. There have been studies with glucosamine and chondroitin in IC patients that did show some benefit. So glucosamine and chondroitin, they naturally have glycosaminoglycans in them also. They just don't have enough. And so it's just kind of an additional bladder support, but not necessarily enough for the bladder in and of itself by itself. And then we have like your calcium glycerophosphate, which is going to be, removing acidity in foods. And then we have our calcium with vitamin D, which is specific for reducing stomach sensitivity. So we actually recommend this product sometimes. In addition, if you have a very sensitive stomach, there's a high nutrient content in the aloe. And so sometimes we recommend the calcium and vitamin D3 in companion with the aloe, just to help with those people that have sensitive stomachs. And then for that reason, you always want equal parts calcium to equal parts magnesium. So if you're taking anything that has calcium in it, it can lead to chronic constipation. And so we chose specifically the magnesium oxide form because it was the best at helping keep the bowels just naturally healthy by naturally just keeping water in there and helping to keep things moving. And so every single one of our supplements has been chosen. I think I created the vitamin D3 for myself secretly.
That's great.
For my own vitamin D deficiency. But yeah. And then like our skin care, and we have our new CBD supplement, which is, we studied that at the University of Colorado. We did a study, the whole series of patients, to look at bioavailability, how systemic the product goes into your bloodstream. And so we were looking at aloe acts as a carrier naturally. So if you actually look at any of our supplements, all of them have a little bit of our aloe in it. And that is specifically to act as a carrier for those nutrients so your body retains more and wastes less. And the same theory went into it when we decided to put the aloe in the CBD. We went through years of extensive trying out different strains, different things, make sure, that we could find a form that where no pesticides were being used. And, actually our strain that we're hoping to continue with is actually just got a USDA organic certification. So we're kind of excited about that. That's the first to be USDA certified organic. And so we were very thoughtful about that from the beginning, like we are with any of our products. And we look to seek out, there's 3 types of CBD. There's full spectrum, and that means it has all the endocannabinoids and the THC. And then there's broad spectrum, which means it has all the endocannabinoids and no THC. And then there is CBD isolate, which is just the pure CBD itself. And, so we tried out different things. We had some of our customers who had chronic pain conditions and everything to try it out to help us, to give us feedback and tell us which works best for them. So we kind of threw them out in kind of a double blind kind of scenario. And we found that the isolate was the most effective. Now, I'm sure the people that know CBD or other things like that, there are theories that the endocannabinoids play a part in synergy, different things like that. But for us, what we found, and the reason why we brought this on was because the CBD isolate. Now, hopefully, we do plan on hopefully once the FDA evolves their regulations and different things like that, that we can get some of our research released and show you guys what we've been working on the CBD for and why we released it. But that is forthcoming. And then we also have an entire line of skincare as well, focused in mind with the needs definitely of women's health, in mind with the Aloe Glide. It's 100% FDA approved, 100% natural vaginal moisturizer and sexual lubricant. So it can be used for sex, but it's also going to be therapeutic because, again, it has that concentrated aloe vera in it, which is going to help be that anti-inflammatory and analgesic. So when it's already hard for all of us to have sex, we wanted to think about the way in which we could make that a little bit more comfortable. And so we actually sell applicators so women can just insert it vaginally just to help make those tissues healthy on a regular basis and keep those tissues healthy. So
wow, that is incredible.
Yeah. And then we're constantly innovating and adding. We have we just introduced last October, we introduced our Aloe Fresh personal wipes, which are great. I love those things because I keep them in every toilet in my house. I keep them in my purse, in my car, anywhere I can, because those are going to also help with rebalancing pH naturally down there. So every time you use a soap down there that isn't pH balanced, which most on the market are not, every time you have sex or we're constantly introducing things that are throwing our pH off, not to, mention our own urine, which in a lot of cases is a mess when we get to it. And so for this reason, these are great because you can use them at any time, anywhere you're at, and they're just going to help with rebalancing their pH, and they're so refreshing. And you can almost feel it when you try those things out. So that's one of our newer ones. And actually later this year, we'll be coming out with a pH balanced feminine wash as well.
Ooh, I was going to ask if you're working on something like that, because that is definitely needed.
Yeah, we are working on formulating right now. It'll be a pH balanced foaming wash. And actually, interestingly enough, with everything going on with COVID, we got wiped out with, we've been getting wiped out with our gelée. People have been trying to buy it bulk and different things like that. So we make hand sanitizer and different things. And so we said, well, why don't we just make the hand sanitizer for people? And so what we've done is we've taken our same concentrated aloe vera with 70% alcohol and created a hand sanitizer that'll actually be out sometime next month as well.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So we're always creating.
Yeah, I think I have about like 10 products now that I want to add to my to my regular regimen. So I'm definitely gonna check it out. I have a vitamin D deficiency. I've always been looking for one that's been easy on the tummy and it's been hard. So definitely going to check out your variety of that. And as far as the wipes go, I was actually sent a couple free samples with my last order, which I thought was amazing because that's a great way to get people to try products. And I loved them. So I'm definitely going to order some of those. I think that's just so great because the wipes on the market are not pH balanced. They actually cause a lot more irritation. So just everything is so intentional and I love it. And I really appreciate your time being on the show today, Heather, and just really enlightening us about the many benefits of aloe that are out there. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Thank you for having me and thank you for letting me ramble for an hour.
No, absolutely. It's been great. This was a great conversation and just a really necessary topic. And I think very eye-opening.
This is definitely my passion.
Yeah, it's so great to see a CEO of a company, who's lived through what you're trying to really help relieve, but is just also so passionate about it and knowledgeable. So it's just really great to see. And I'm really proud of everything that you're doing. And I will be a lifelong customer and definitely continue promoting your products to everyone that I can, because they're seriously miracle and really have just helped me get my life back on track.
Yeah, it is. Like I said, in the beginning, the stories that we get to hear and the people that we get to help. I get amazing emails, minimum once a week, with the stories, the life-changing stories, and it makes every one of my employees can tell you that our customers are what makes it so worth coming to work every day and getting to help so many people and getting to hear their stories and talk to them. My staff is not just here to take orders, but they will talk to you. They will stay on the phone for hours if need be, because sometimes someone just needs someone to understand them and to listen to them and understand what they're going through, and to be able to, a lot of the women that work here and men as well have disorders or things that they're dealing with on their own. And so they be able to help others and the compassion that comes through and shows through. I can't say enough good things about my staff. So.
Well, that's wonderful. It's great that you have such a passionate and empathetic team that's really needed, and it really comes through. So again, I really appreciate you being on the show. And I want to thank my audience for taking the time to listen to the Bladder Battle Podcast special series, I See in the Dark. Make sure to subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, or leave a rating or review on Spotify or Apple. And stay tuned for the next episode right here on the Bladder Battle Podcast.